Happy Easter, everyone. I'm looking forward to seeing some of you at the sunrise service on the beach. It'll be nice to actually gather in person, even if it's going to be a little bit cold, but it's looking to be sunny at least, and there's going to be a nice bonfire. So that'll be nice. Looking forward to seeing you all. So, being Easter, I'm going to start today with a reading from Mark about Jesus' resurrection. This is Mark 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they could go to anoint Jesus' dead body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they came to the tomb. They were saying to each other, "Who's going to roll the stone away from the entrance for us?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone had already been rolled away, and it was a very large stone. Going into the tomb, they saw a young man in a white robe seated on the right side, and they were startled. But he said to them, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He isn't here. Look, here's the place where they laid him. Go, tell his disciples, especially Peter, that he is going ahead of you into Galilee. You will see him there, just as he told you." Overcome with terror and dread, they fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. So this is shortly after Jesus is crucified, and this is describing his resurrection from death after his crucifixion. Now, this resurrection could take many forms, such as, think about for the apostles, their experience of Jesus in the vision or dream, or other types of mystical experience of Christ being present within them after his death, turning their lives around so they could change their lives and have a rebirth of their own sorts in order to spread Jesus' teaching. So there's many ways that the resurrection could be looked at, including Jesus' presence within the apostles at the time or within us today. But Easter is about rebirth and renewal and hope for new and better things. And it's hard not to feel some hope for positive change when the green shoots of the daffodils start poking their heads up and then their fiery yellow flowers emerge. At the time of year when all of nature is reborn as well, right? So we start seeing new life emerge around us in the flowers, but also in the first buds in the trees, which will be coming soon. Not quite there yet, but we're getting there. The return of bird song. All of nature is, after so much of the dead of winter, right? Nature is now being reborn in the springtime, and it's hard not to feel joyful about that. Now, this Easter is seeming like a time of resurrection in an entirely new way compared to normal because of the rollout of the COVID vaccine. It's sort of like our lives as we knew them before the pandemic died. And it just feels like that at times during the pandemic, didn't it? Everything that you knew was just so different. And these lives that you had before weren't there anymore. But as we all start to become protected by the vaccine, and hopefully the number of people infected with COVID starts going down eventually, our lives and the very way that we live is being reborn. So it's not going to be entirely like it was before the pandemic started because we've learned so much, we know new things, and we're different people now because of it. So just how the flowers budding at each time of year, they aren't exactly the same as they were before. I think of my lilies in my garden, and they divide every year, and sometimes I get lots of flowers, sometimes we only get a few, but the plant seems to just keep growing and expanding every year. They sort of make this circle, and it's always a little bit different each year. And just like the flowers, the life we knew it before the pandemic is very different. But in this rebirth, we are going to be able to experience life again in a new way. So in this resurrection we're undergoing as a community, there's this whole new life emerging, and we can be hopeful for that. Maybe it will even be a better life than the one before the pandemic because of the things we've learned. Now, not always easy because with newness comes the unknown, and that can be scary. And the women who first bore witness to Jesus' resurrection were scared, right? They say they were overcome with terror and dread, and they fled. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Because rebirth and new things and newness and change is a scary thing, and it can be afraid of. But it can be something to be afraid of, but it also is something for which to feel hopeful. And so I'm going to share 2 readings that are both about resurrection of sorts. Now, the first is the story of the phoenix. The phoenix has its roots in Greek mythology, but it actually has its roots in ancient Egypt and has other associations with other cultures, such as the Native American thunderbird, the firebird of Slavic folklore, the Chinese huang, and there was a Japanese story about a similar bird as well, many others. So the phoenix is a bird, and the name and the bird as we know it today is mostly comes from the Greek myth. And this is where the name phoenix comes from. So this is the story of the phoenix rising from the ashes. There is a bird that lays no eggs and has no young. It was here when the world began and is still living today in a hidden, faraway desert spot. It is the phoenix, the bird of fire. One day, when the world was still very young, the sun looked down and saw a magnificent bird. This bird was beautiful and had shimmering feathers. They were bright red and gold in color and shone like the sun itself. The beautiful bird dazzled the sun. Glorious phoenix bird, you shall be my bird and live forever. Live forever, the sun cried out. After hearing the sun, the phoenix was overjoyed. It danced around in the sky among the clouds. Glorious sun, from this day onward, my song shall be for you alone, the beautiful phoenix said. But the poor bird was not happy for long. It was so magnificent that everyone wanted to have a feather from it. All kinds of men, women, and children chased the phoenix, attempting to trap it. The bird was incredibly upset. So the phoenix thought, I shall fly away and go east. I shall fly to the land of the rising sun. The phoenix flew and flew for a very long time. At last, the phoenix came to the desert. The desert was free from all humans. It flew freely in the desert, singing and praising the sun above. The phoenix was happy and peaceful in the desert. And its days flying and singing. Years passed, and the phoenix did not die. Almost 500 years later, the phoenix grew old and feeble. It could now soar high among the clouds. Nor could it sing, it could not sing as high among the clouds, nor could it sing as it used to. I don't want to live like this, thought the phoenix. I want to be young again. I want to fly and sing again. So the phoenix sang, "Oh, glorious sun, make me young and strong again." The sun did not listen. The phoenix sang and sang. Day after day, the old phoenix sang to the sun. When the sun did not answer, the phoenix decided to go back to the land it came from. There it would call out to the sun one more time. It flew across the desert, over hills, green valleys, and high mountains. The journey seemed to be tiring and long to the old phoenix. Whenever the phoenix stopped, it would pick up some cinnamon bark and some fragrant herbs. It carried some in its claws and hid the rest in its feathers. Finally, the phoenix reached its destination. There the phoenix found a tall tree and set to building a nest there. It built the nest with the cinnamon barks and lined it with the herbs. Then the phoenix flew to a nearby tree and collected some gum called myrrh. It made an egg out of the gum and carried it to the nest. Now everything was ready. So the phoenix lifted its head and sang out one last time, "Oh, glorious sun, make me young and strong again." This time, the sun heard the phoenix sing. The sun swiftly chased the clouds and put the winds at rest and shone down the hillside with all its power. A blinding sight it was. All the animals ran back to their caves and hid away from the sun's fierce rays. Only the phoenix sat on its nest. It bathed in the sun's light. Suddenly, there was a flash, and the phoenix was surrounded by fire. The flames died out after a while, but the phoenix was nowhere to be seen. The tree and the nest were not burnt. All that was left was a silver gray ash. Then the ash began to tremble and started rising upwards. Slowly, a young bird's head popped out. It was very small and stretchy, but the bird grew as every minute passed by. Finally, the bird was itself again. Phoenix had risen from the ashes. It lifted its neck and spread out its beautiful wings and soared high into the sky. The phoenix picked up the ash and put in the egg. Then it closed the egg and flew away with it in its claws, saying, "Sun, glorious sun, I shall sing my songs for you alone, forever and ever." When the song ended, the wind began to blow again. All the birds came out of hiding. Birds of all kinds and sizes flew behind the phoenix. "You are the greatest bird of all," they all sang together. The phoenix and the birds flew towards the city of the sun, to the temple of the sun the Egyptians had made. There the phoenix placed the egg at the altar. "And now I must fly alone," said the phoenix, and flew to a faraway desert. The phoenix lives there still, but every 500 years, when it grows weak, it returns and builds a nest with the fragrant herbs. It sings to the sun again is surrounded by flames, and each time it rises from its own ashes, young and strong. So that is the story of the phoenix rising from the ashes. Now, think about the past year that we've had in the context of the story. There's been many difficulties that we've had to face as a society during the times of the pandemic and COVID. But maybe like the phoenix rising from the ashes, we can be reborn out of these difficulties by learning from them. So think of all there's been a lot that's ways of life that's been destroyed, lives that have been destroyed by COVID. But if we think of that, those things that have been, those difficult times, or those things that have been damaged or destroyed, we can think of those as the ashes of the COVID pandemic and of our past lives. But just like the phoenix rose up out of the ashes, we can rise up out of the ashes of the troubles of the pandemic and all the other troubles of the world. And because we've learned from those things, we can rise up again, younger and stronger than we were before. So the other thing I want to read from you is a poem by Maya Angelou, and it's called "Still I Rise." Now, this is another type of resurrection. So in this poem, Maya Angelou discusses rising out of a difficult past. And once again, you could think of that difficult past as the ashes that the phoenix rises out of. And it was a difficult past of both her ancestors and her own more recent past. And it's a rising up also from what other people expect of you and how other people see you. And they may see certain things about you or see you certain ways or stereotype about you. And even though those things aren't true. So it's also about rising up from what other people expect of you or think of you that may not be true. And when I read it, you'll hear that in spite of the pain and fear, so those difficulties, that she is leaving behind all of that to rise into something better. So here is Maya Angelou's "Still I Rise." You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room, just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Do you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard if I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard? You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I rise. Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise up from a past that's rooted in pain. I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. So that is all for today. I hope you have a wonderful Easter and be safe, be kind, and I hope to see you at the beach at the sunrise service or at the Easter service later that day on Easter.